Has a message for those angry union protesters. Think about the taxpayers paying your wages because they're the ones tapped out, and Republican and Democratic governors seem to agree it is time to cough up. The former Minnesota governor with me right now. Governor, good to have you.
Good to be with you, Neil.
What do you think of what transpired moments ago in New Jersey?
Well, first of all, my hat's off to my good friend, Governor Christie. He's done a remarkable job in that state, and I think this is exactly the right direction for this issue in this state. I had a very similar experience in Minnesota. I signed a bill before I left office with a Democrat legislature reducing pension obligations in my state dramatically by, in part, requiring union employees to pay more into their pensions and then reducing their increases, and it was a $2 billion or so impact over the next 10 years, so it was significant. I also had major public strikes with the bus drivers in my state. We had a 44-day bus strike, one of the largest in the country, got that problem resolved and got a benefit shut off that was way beyond what the private sector was getting. So I've dealt with these issues before. They were cool and popular, but it's the right thing to do, Neil, and we have to do it. Our country's drowning in debt, and this is one of the reasons that we're going to that causes the problem and how we're going to get it fixed. I
remember the press that you received during a couple of those instances, Governor, as I recall and see quite literally as a New Jersey resident what Chris Christie's running into here, and it's generally not good. What do you make? I don't know if you had a chance to hear what Pat Goodell said about caution for Republicans, that they shouldn't over-dramatize this, that they shouldn't, try to make this look like something they're shoving down union members' faces. I guess the equivalent of spiking the ball. What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, I've got some unique credibility in this area. I come from a union family, what was Reagan Democrats. My dad, for much of his life, was a Teamster truck driver. I was in a union, Neil, for 6 or 7 years, so I know these issues. I've lived them personally. Grew up in a meatpacking town, and I can tell you they're out of control, and that's why they need to be reined in. They're part of the reason we're going overboard. That doesn't mean you unnecessarily spike the ball, as you said, but we got to tell people the truth, and the truth is the unions are getting a better deal than the taxpayers. They're part of the reason why government's going bankrupt. We have to fix them. That takes strength, courage, and truth. I delivered it in Minnesota, and I'm glad Governor Christie's delivering it in New Jersey.
What do you think of those union members then who threatened to target the Democrats in the state Senate today who did vote for this, that we're not going to forget this vote?
Well, that's their prerogative, but I had a government shutdown, the first in 150 years in my state, over tax and spending issues in 2005. Many in the pundit class said, stick a fork in Pawlenty, he's done, his political career's over. The next year I got reelected in 2006 in one of the most difficult environments for Republicans in the modern history of the country, in a very blue state, more liberal than New Jersey, perhaps one of the most liberal states in the country. So this declaration that somehow the unions or liberal interests are going to take out all the Republicans, I don't buy that, because the public is on our side now on these issues.
Governor, how do you think Republicans are faring with union voters, with union members?
Well, again, I think you got to separate the public employee unions from the private unions.
Right.
Many in the public employee unions tend to be Democrats, not all of them. But let's face it, they got a sweetheart deal for a long time. And when I had that bus driver strike, Neil, and I highlighted that people driving the bus were getting a better deal by far than the taxpayers, and I said, hey, do you know that the bus drivers are getting that? People would say, they are, Governor? I said, you're paying for that? We are, Governor? Do you think we should do something about it? Of course. And so we're probably never going to win over the public employee unions, but those private sector employees unions that aren't getting such a good deal, who are unemployed now, who see that their brothers and sisters in the public sector are getting a better deal, many of them are open to Republican arguments. And we don't have to do better overnight, but I think over time we got a good chance with those union members to demonstrate our case and why a growing economy is good for them.
As you enter this presidential battle, Governor, what did you make of David Axelrod's comments over the weekend that the president's popularity, tumbling though it may, he's still cool. He's still the cool guy in this race. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it.
Well, I don't think Americans are going to want to be duped twice. And Barack Obama has perpetuated one of the biggest bait-and-switch tactics in the history of the country. He ran as one thing. He's delivered almost none of it, broke most of his promises, and he's got an economy with $4 a gallon gas, a federal government that's out of control, crushing levels of unemployment. And you go into those swing states that are going to decide this election, and his numbers aren't just bad, they're awful. If the election were held today, he'd be beat.
Many pundits who've looked at your economic plan, that is the one that calls for two tax rates at 10% and 25%, say that that's the political equivalent of your own Hail Mary desperate pass, that the expectations of 5% or more growth are simply unrealistic over a decade, and that you know it, but that you're desperate. What do you say?
Well, some of the best economists in the country, including John Taylor at Stanford, has written about this and said, while it's aggressive, it is doable. Steve Forbes has written positively about it. Art Laffer has written positively about it, and many others. And Larry Kudlow. So these are individuals who, have looked at the plan and given it, I think, a stamp of approval. Is it aggressive? Of course it is. But we need courageous, bold leadership now. We got an economy that is in neutral or reverse. We got a president who has no clue, never really had any connection or respect for the private sector, thinks every answer is taking things from the private sector into government. I want to take things out of government and get the private sector going again. So it's just a different philosophy. We tried his. It's not working. And the program that I put on the table is the most specific, most aggressive plan of any candidate in the race, including the president's, and it'll work.
Well, you made it clear over the weekend that it's more aggressive than the president perceived frontrunner, Mitt Romney. I want you to comment on your comment. This is from this weekend.
If we're going to have a political charge against Barack Obama about health care reform, we better do it with somebody who's not a co-conspirator in the charge.
You didn't do that in the big debate, but you make it up for lost time, I guess, right?
Well, I said after the debate, Neil, that the question was directly put about the comparison between the Massachusetts plan and the federal plan, and I should have addressed it squarely. I thought in that moment it was better to focus on the president than another Republican, but the fact is I got asked a direct question. I should have answered it directly, and I've been doing that since, and I'll do it now, and rest assured we won't let that opportunity pass again. But one of the major charges, one of the major issues in the race is going to be Obamacare. And I don't see how you can prosecute that case effectively if you were, a co-conspirator in a charge.
But you don't think the wording of that's a little strong?
Well, I mean, I usually put in the word political, but
right.
If you're going to prosecute the political case, you can't be somebody who's basically had the same plan in your home state and was the champion of that plan in your home state.
Because he says it's not the same plan. But you think that that's his Achilles heel, I guess, right?
Well, there's been some highlighted modest differences between the two, but I don't think you can be a reasonable or fair-minded person and look at the two plans and not conclude they're essentially the same or very similar.
Governor, thank you very much. It was nice having you.
All right, Neil, thank you.
Governor Tim Pawlenty.